artists and animators. Mark Simon is an Atlanta-based artist whose career includes screen credits as a story artist, producer, and director for both live action and animated projects, as well as authoring numerous industry texts. We've invited Mark onto our live stream to discuss a scene that he storyboarded for Dexter New Blood and how he incorporates 3D models into his boards. Mark, welcome to the live stream.
Hey, thanks, Mike. Always a pleasure to see you, and I love sharing these little tips and tricks with everybody, so this will be fun.
I was really excited to have you back. So, Mark, how did you get involved on Dexter New Blood, and what did your role look like during the day-to-day of production?
Well, Dexter, what was funny when New Blood, which is basically it's the 10th season, it's the one that just came out on Showtime last year. I actually storyboarded the original pilot of Dexter 15, 16 years ago, however long it was. But that's not why I got the new Dexter. One of the directors I worked with on Flight Attendant called me when he came on. He was a director in the later seasons on the original Dexter. He said, "Hey, I want to keep working with you," and he called me up, and we made a deal. So I came in and I storyboarded all 10 episodes of the new Dexter. It's called Dexter New Blood, which was a blast. And and like usual in live action, you're most of the time. I mean, I haven't been full time on a live action series probably for 30 years. You're a day player. You come in whenever the director is ready to start on a new sequence. So there were 2 directors on Dexter New Blood that each did half of the episodes. And they would just call and check my availability, and then we would set a time and I would work with each one. So, every day is a bit different. If we're starting a sequence, it starts with my having a long session with the director where we go shot by shot. And I'll go over an example of that here in just a minute. And then, once we're done, I already have approvals, and I go on and then I spend however much time I need to for doing the cleanup. So, it varies my days. Some days I'm doing, for meetings in the afternoon, I'm prepping or researching imagery or getting stuff from the art department in the morning or cleaning up another scene. Then I get on with the director and have our session. So it's meetings and drawings and research are my days. And then on days that they don't need me, I'm off on something else.
All right. And was this a production where you had the opportunity to spend time on set, or was this remote?
This one was remote. I mean, it would have been fun to be on location, except for the cold. We shot up in the Northeast. But now I did everything from my studio in Atlanta. And most directors I work with are used to working with me that way. I'm actually one of the pioneers of storyboarding virtually. I've been doing it
Before the pandemic?
Oh, I was doing it more than a decade before the pandemic. So I've been doing storyboards all over the world for 15, 20 years, however long before Zoom came out. So I guess I was using Skype for a while and whatever else was available before then. So this one was one of those that I did all virtually. One of the directors I'd worked with quite a bit, the one who called and asked me to come on. The other one was a new convert into working my way, because I do work differently than a lot of story artists. Here's the way I look at storyboards. And anyone who works at my studio, they have to work this way. And a lot of this came because so many live action directors don't like working with story artists. And they don't like working with them because they don't get their vision. And so there's this battle between the story artist's vision and the director's vision. And our goal is to get the director's vision. So if the story artist is not drawing exactly what the director wants, they're failing. It's very simple. So I have longer meetings with the directors, but there's almost never follow-up meetings because I have approvals in the first meeting. So when we're going through things, I'm getting approvals as I sketch. So if they want some a different screen direction or someone closer or further, or move this prop in or whatever it is, I'm doing that in real time. Because I'm doing my sketching on different layers. I add in camera moves in real time. I bring in the 3D vehicles, which you'll see in just a minute, all in real time. So, literally when we're done with our meeting, everything's been approved. And a lot of artists who just take notes and go away and sketch and come back, they're spending 3 and 4 days to get approvals on something. I'm getting approved in a few hours. So it's much, much more efficient. So yeah, the first meeting takes longer, but because there's fewer meetings with the director, overall, it takes less time of the director, and there's no frustration because the director is getting exactly what they want immediately. I mean, I've literally had, and I've got an email I saved from one director who she told me that she hated storyboarding. She didn't like the process because she never felt she got what she wanted. And they would go through it and then she wouldn't use them. And I've heard this from a lot of directors. And halfway through my style of working with her, she goes, all right, I'm a convert. I'm never not working this way again. I see the benefits. So, if you just keep in mind, it's the director's vision. In us as creators, as story artists, I'm plussing it. I'm helping them make the best decisions, and
It's collaborative.
I'm suggesting shots. Yeah, it's collaborative. I'm still getting my creative input, but if they don't want, or if I'm going a direction that they don't see, they just tell me right then and there, and we're able to figure out exactly what the director wants. So they're functional and very, very fast functional, which also means my thumbnails production can start using immediately. So literally within a few hours, they can start doing the breakdowns of scheduling, even for my roughs, while I then go through and clean them up and put in all the extra production notes and whatever else I need to do to make them really inspirational for the crew.
Before we get into your presentation, I just wanted to ask one question, and it's a big question. There are certain kinds of scenes that pose challenges in animation. Crowd scenes and moving backgrounds are common complaints if you're purely working in 2D, and you have a script that maybe doesn't take into account the realities of 2D animation production. Are there practical challenges and considerations with live action storyboarding, with live action productions, I should say, that storyboard artists should be aware of?
The biggest thing is, as a live action story artist, you really need to understand filmmaking. You need to understand directing, camera, stunts, visual effects, lenses. They're calling out very specific things, and you need to know how to incorporate those notes, both either as written notes or in your on-screen arrows or the way you draw something, depending on what your director says, because it's you and the director. So on TV shows, about half the time, one of the directors of photography, the DPs, will be there. Sometimes if it's a stunt heavy, the stunt coordinator might join one of the meetings or a part of a meeting, or like last week, we had some big crowd shots, CG crowd shots of zombies for Fear of the Walking Dead. And the visual effects supervisor joined on a couple of the meetings. But it's
even
always
live action productions are now animated.
Yeah, these are all live action productions. So it's just me and the director plus a couple other crew heads if needed at times. So the only problems come if the story artist doesn't understand aspects of film production. When the stunt guy says we need to hide these mats or we need to hide the springboard, I understand what they're talking about, and I'll actually put a note in. Or if we need to hide the horde behind something and then have it revealed, or if they're calling for a steady cam instead of a dolly, there is a difference there. And so I know what notes I need to put in. If a director calls, I'm going to use a wide lens here. Well, how does that affect what I'm drawing? So I need to know that and then be able to draw it. Storyboard Pro is strong enough where anything I need to do, I can do. And sometimes how to represent something just comes from, do you have a trick of something you've done before that will work? If you've got a really wide pan, if you're looking down one street and you do a 180-degree pan to look the opposite direction, you can do it in separate cuts. I don't. I do it in one because I want to see it. So there's just a way that you draw a curve, and even the Storyboard Pro has those guidelines for curved backgrounds, multiple perspective points that I'll use when needed. And things like that are invaluable. So then you draw it and then you just do the pan. And one of the things I tell people, especially now that we all have digital phones, if you don't know how a background will warp, take a pan photo of something, because the pan will actually warp the image itself. Use that as an example. Look at it and say, oh, so these lines aren't straight. They actually do curve on a pan, but it looks straight when you're actually doing the camera move. Some of it's practice, some of it's play, some of it is what we're going to be showing here, making things in 3D. You know, there are times if there's a complicated camera move, it's sometimes I just use a 3D image in a 2D scene, just because I don't want to have to draw a car. It's much faster to drop in a CG version. Other times, and I'll show you a sample here in a second, where they wanted the camera to go from behind or profile to behind a truck that's swerving, to really get everyone to understand, everyone in the crew to understand the camera move. Well, I'll simulate it. I'll just do it in 3D. So I'll draw 2D elements of the background, and then bring in a 3D truck and move my 3D camera around, and then you see exactly what it's going to be like, especially when you watch the animatic. Because even though I'm working on the timeline of a live action production, which is really, really short, I'm providing animatics, full animatics. And I can do it, so quickly using the software that before Storyboard Pro, there was no possible way for me to do what I do in anywhere even close to the timeline that I do it in. I mean, not even close. If I'm in the middle of a sequence and there's a change, I can just make that change and hit play, and the animatic is updated. Back in the days when we used, paper, or then Photoshop, and then Photoshop went to After Effects, After Effects elements went to Premiere, there were like 10 steps every time I made a change before you could see the change reflected. Now I just make the change, I hit play. I mean, the difference is astounding.
All right. So, Mark, do you want to give us a tour of the truck crash sequence that you storyboarded for episode 8 of Dexter: New Blood?
Yeah. So let me show you this. So when I sit down, or when I get a call to start on a sequence, for instance, this was episode 1008, I believe. And so they send me the script. They tell me and I ask them, all right, which sequences are we doing? Because in live action, you never storyboard the entire production. You only storyboard visual effects, stunts, and fancy camera moves, and the associated shots with them. So it's just very specific scenes. And here's the other thing I need to mention. Since a lot of people on here are animation people, a scene is different in live action than animation. Every cut in animation is a new scene. That is not the way any other type of production works. A scene is actually one location at one point in time, and then you have a number of shots that are within that scene. So you're going to have a lot of different camera angles. Each new camera angle is considered a shot. So your numbering is different. The way you talk about things is different, and the way you set up the software is different. And Storyboard Pro does have a setting under Edit Preferences where you can do numbering for live action or numbering for animation. So it's very easy to switch back and forth. But it's important, as I'm talking about a scene, that our animation friends understand. I'm talking about you would call it a sequence. It's a scene in live action.
It's a very different convention, yeah.
It is, yeah. So here we've got the one of the bad guys is Elric. He has recently captured Dexter, tied Dexter up in the back of his truck, and in here Dexter wakes up, garrots him by he's zip tied, and he pulls it across the guy's mouth, rips his mouth open, and they get into a car accident or a truck accident. They're driving an SUV. So reading through it, I went and found references of what the actors look like. I like my storyboards to look just like the actors. And then I found other references that I needed that were in there. In particular, I emailed or called, whichever it was, transportation, found out what the vehicle was that Elric was going to be driving. And it was this red and white SUV. I found this on SketchUp. If I need to make any changes to the styling or the color, I do that in SketchUp. I export it out as FDX or FBX. It's a typo there. An FBX file, and I import that into Storyboard Pro under libraries. If you go to 3D models, you right click and import. So here's my Dodge Ram Charger. And then I test it. Before I ever get on with the director, I test, make sure the model is going to work, because sometimes they don't as well. Glass, for instance, generally is not clear when you import a 3D model. So I make sure I take out the glass layers in SketchUp so that I can see through a vehicle. So I make sure I'm ready. And then I make sure I know what the locations are going to be like. So there are times that it's either posted online within the production documents, or the DP or first AD or someone will send me overheads or set designs of the different locations that I need to know in order to storyboard within. So I make sure that I'm ready. And then whatever reference information I have or I can find for the sequences and scenes that we're going to be doing, I pull reference imagery, and I build my online library. Not online, but the library that I can open up, so I can just drag images or audio, whatever else I need as I'm working. And the director says, this one location, and I just drag it from the library in, and I can make notes on that. So I try to be as prepared as possible. So when I'm working with the director, they're not waiting and we're not guessing about anything. I pull it on because I'm sharing my screen just like I am with all of you. And so they can see what I'm sketching, which is why I'm able to so quickly get approvals on everything. And I love working with directors face to face. Not always possible, especially in days of COVID. Story artists are one of the first lines that are just kept at a distance. The fewer people they have around, the less people they have to test. So we usually working remotely. This is from The Walking Dead. And when I'm meeting face to face with the director, I will still connect into a big screen monitor in one of our conference rooms, so they can see what I'm drawing. And especially if we have the DP joining us or a producer, whoever else might need to be there, they can see what I'm sketching. So notes, discussions, whatever, in real time, during our breakdown phase, they can see it. Working virtually, it's kind of the same thing. I just don't need the extra monitor. I just share my screen. Okay, so now as I'm working with a director, for instance, here was one where we were going to be doing a Russian arm, which is now called the Ukraine, believe it or not. No one wants to call it a Russian arm because it was actually invented in Ukraine anyway. So I actually made that note up here that it was a Russian arm. So that went into my notes over on the side. So it exports out. Again, if the director tells me, I want the whole crew to know, because it's used for planning and budgeting and scheduling. So he was saying, okay, so the vehicle is going to be swerving around. So I sketch it out. I put motion arrows in there. We're tracking back with it, so I'm making sure that's knowledgeable. But I just do one quick sketch, and he goes, okay, yeah, this will work. It's good framing. This is what we're going to need. There are times I'll, at this point, if it's a straight on shot or, without a whole lot of movement around, I'll just drag a model in. So here's my model. I want to keep this just as a 2D shot. So if a director wants a specific angle, I just bring it in and okay, so what's the angle you want to see? Do you want to see, a little bit of the side, a little bit more of the side, and we'll literally just work it out together. And, profile like this or whatever. So once I get approval, yep, that's the angle I want to see. Great. I just drop it in. So it's already approved, right? It's literally that fast. So what I did is from this, in my cleanup, I drew in the background, which since we're moving forward, I had the background receding. So it looks like we're tracking. And then I actually converted this to a 3D scene. I brought in the vehicle, and I had the vehicle, we're still tracking with it, but you can see that it's swerving around. It was important to see it swerving. And then I brought in a 2D layer. Here, I'll zoom in on this, of Elric getting garroted. So I drew this as a 2D layer, and I dropped it into the 3D scene and I just put it inside the truck, which didn't have windows, so it's easy to see through. And that way now it tracks with the vehicle. As it's swerving around, the characters stay mounted in it. So very quickly, I was able to get an exact feel for what the director wanted. Same thing here. This was one, it was a more complicated shot. So as the director and I were talking, and again, it was a Russian arm, he wanted to start on the front of the vehicle, track around, profile, and then keep tracking around, and then follow the car swerving erratically down the road. Now in 2D, in just sketching, that would take time. But what I did, this is about as far as he wanted to be from the vehicle. The guy is being garroted. All right, so we see that. I got it. He approved this camera move. So when after our meeting, I went through and I built a 3D scene, or 3D shot in this instance. So we start in front. You see he's being garroted. We're tracking, and then we come and we track around profile. We keep going around back behind. And now we're following as it's swerving. Now, I don't care how good you are at drawing. If you're not doing this shot in 3D, you're not showing production exactly what the director wants. You can simulate it very, very well. But, I'm giving them an animatic in very little time, showing exactly what it's looking like. So
because you can draw the car going through all those poses, but you could also just have a 3D model doing that.
Yeah, and look, I can draw a vehicle. It just takes time. I don't want to draw vehicles because it takes time. I'll just drop it in, and then it's perfect. And directors only care if you can represent what they want to see at the end. That's all that matters. We are creating the visual blueprints for production to work from. Nothing else matters. So if there's a shortcut, I'm taking that shortcut. What does it do? It makes my boards better, more efficient, and more accurate, and more used. So because we're going 3 different angles, the angle of the characters inside changes. So in one panel, I'll actually do this entire thing. So the road that we're on, there's the ground plane, which is one layer, right? The trees are another layer. So they're in 3D. I'm putting them perpendicular to each other.
It looks like you have like 2 layers of trees for the parallax, right?
No, it's 1 layer of trees.
Okay.
Just because it's in 3D, as I pan the camera across it, it is in 3D. The ground plane is just set at 90 degrees. Otherwise, it wouldn't work. It can't all be a one vertical flat. You have to actually build a 3D set in 2D with 2D elements. So what I did is I did the entire camera move and motion in one panel. Once I was happy with that and all the timing, then as I came around profile, I sliced the panel. We just go through and split panel at current frame. So I split the panel and I redrew the characters inside the vehicle now in profile. So we go from seeing them straight on to now profile. And then as we come around behind them, I split it again, just did another layer, 2D layer, to show them from behind. I just put that layer inside the 3D vehicle, so it tracks perfectly. So now, all I had to do was draw some rough trees, draw a ground plane, the same characters I would, but now everything is, the camera move and the vehicle is all perfect. It's exactly what the director wanted. And at the end of all this, I'll show you a comparison video where you can see how freakishly close the final export or the final production was to what I boarded, which makes this all worthwhile. So yeah, so this was, this is fun to do. And I just love the way it looks. It's funny, even when I'm working, I'll just kind of scroll through because it's fun to play with. It's like, wow, my art's actually moving.
Yeah.
This is fun. You know, this is why I love doing this stuff. I giggle at myself all day when I'm working. Oh, and so this was an interesting one. So this shot, the director wanted, okay, the camera's down right on the ground, low horizon layer. The vehicle kind of passes over your right-hand shoulder, but as it goes, camera cranes up and we see the truck going off in the distance. I didn't need to do a 3D. Look, building a 3D set does take longer. Working in 2D is faster. 3D elements exported as 2D is very quick. So here, what I did was I have the ground plane of the road as one layer. I have the mountain as another layer, because as you crane up, the mountain will stay the same, but the road will seem to stretch to infinity. So what I did was, without the vehicle, I just stretched the ground plane up. So that's one drawing.
Yeah, it's using scaling.
Yeah, I just scaled it up. Well, I actually skewed it. I didn't scale it. I skewed it.
Right.
So I just stretched
That's clever.
it. And then I just I just tracked the mountain layer to match up with the horizon line of the ground layer. So it's just two layers that are tracking with each other. And look, it looks like a perfect zoom or crane, right? We're craning up.
Yeah, no, it's a great effect.
Beautifully. But
for the car, did you also scale it as it's going towards the horizon?
Yeah. So
awesome.
What I did was I imported the truck just like I showed you a second ago. I imported the truck with the camera down at the wheels. And then as we started craning up, I just right-clicked on the layer. And here we go. Right-click on the layer, and I just did update model position. And I just changed the angle that I was seeing the model.
Right.
So
that way you don't need to fiddle with a 3D scene for this. You can just use these 3D elements as 2D assets.
Yeah.
And scale them like normal.
Yeah. And, if all of a sudden this vehicle, because, this is perfect. When I get to the top, it really looks like it's going down the road. It's perfect in perspective. If my angle is off a little bit, I can just come in and just update position, change it around a little bit, move it over there. Nope, that wasn't better. But so it's incredibly fast for me to make whatever adjustments and get exactly what the director wants. So this is all just done with 2D elements, but using a 3D model. You and I were talking about this before. If I'm drawing the truck and the director says, "Can you angle this around this way?" Well, I'm redrawing a truck. Again, I can do it, but that's going to be 20 minutes to draw a good truck, right? Or I can just right-click, update model position, and a couple seconds later, I'm done.
Truck's where you need it to be. So you're using like a 3D element for like what it's really good at, which is just showing this mechanical object in perspective quickly.
Yeah. It makes my storyboards better, makes me faster. I can deliver faster, more accurately, and I can actually have a life because I'm not working till midnight every night. I want to have a life. I've been doing this a long, long time. I've been storyboarding well over 30 years. So I want to have fun.
We were discussing this a little bit earlier, but like, why is it really important for storyboards to be accurate in live action?
So storyboard. All right. So as I mentioned to you, but I'll let everyone else know. Before I got started working in Hollywood, I was superintendent of a construction company. So I was building large custom homes, and there's 82 steps to building a house. So if I was to say to you, what will it take to build me a 3-bedroom house? Well, there's 1,000 questions you're going to have. What does it look like? How many extra rooms? Is it brick or, what's the facade on it? Siding? What do the rooms look like? All that kind of stuff, right? The only way to have all 82 steps and all your various tradesmen build the house that you actually want is by creating blueprints. So in live action, the only vision that matters is the director's vision. So the director is the architect. We as story artists are the draftsman. We are creating the blueprints. Our storyboards are the blueprints. Now, in addition to that, we're helping make sure that we're not crossing the line, that we're suggesting better shots or alternate shots, or suggesting, hey, what if we do this? So I'm being creative and helping along the way, but I'm doing it in real time with the director. And if an idea that I have is not within the director's vision, they tell me and I make the adjustment. So it's a win-win. We're working together to make this visually as perfect for the director as possible. So then I'm also putting in all the motion arrows with notes as far as what they're representing, and off on the side, the dialogue and the action notes of, this is going to be a crane shot, or we're using a dolly with a high rise or a hi-hat on it. Whatever it is that I need them to know, for instance, the horde I was talking about earlier, we have 50 live action actors and the horde behind them is all going to be CG. Those are all notes that go in there. So now all the crew heads, production management, the coordinators, the stunt people, the effects people, props, wardrobe, everybody can look through the boards and they see, oh, I need to have this as a rip away, or we need to add more explosions than we were planning. So it's going to take this long to prep it, and I'm going to need this many extra stunt people. The storyboards allow production to properly budget and schedule what they need. And there are times where the director's vision can't be done in the time or budget. So the producer or production supervisor may say, you have to cut this down. We can only have, 5 shots of a CG lion, not 10. And I bring that up just because on Snowfall, it's one of the things we had to do. We were having ILM do the tiger, and we had to limit how many shots we were going to be in it, and that was all figured out and planned for in storyboarding. So it's hugely important, which also means that I have to draw them quickly enough because there's not a lot of prep time in live action. So I'll actually work on and finish off the storyboards in order of the shoot sequence. So, the last shot or the last scene on a script might be the first thing they're shooting. So that has to be the first one that I finish, so they have enough time to make use of the storyboards in their planning and budgeting.
Yeah. So on these sorts of
really understand
it. But you're also saying too on these sorts of productions, things like perspective, the accuracy of what you're drawing to the set, those sorts of considerations matter a lot.
Yeah, absolutely, it matters. So for instance, on this shot here, one of the things I asked the director, how high are we going? And he said, well, we're going 30 feet, and we're going to be using, in this case, it was probably going to be a Russian arm. So I would put that in the notes.
Because the camera physically has to get above the car, right, while it's moving.
Yeah, because they're going to be moving in the middle of the road. So it had to be mounted to a vehicle so it wouldn't just be blocking the road all the time. So those kind of considerations, if the DP and director call for it, I'm going to make sure my storyboards give that information to everybody in the cast and crew. Well, the cast doesn't matter as far as that does, but the cast wants to see these things too. So the camera department, production supervisor, whoever, they know, okay, we need to make sure we have all of this prepped and ready for this very specific scene. So, again, anything I know that's of potential value to production, I make sure that everybody in production knows it. And they know it because it's in my storyboards, not just drawn, but also my written notes. So I'm kind of anal about this. I want to make sure that my boards are as functional as possible for every aspect of production that storyboards needs to help, which is why my boards are so helpful. It's not just an exercise of futility for a director that they go through it for a shot list and never use them. No, my boards are always used in production. They'll bring them in and actually put them, they'll blow them up and then put them on foam core out
on
location. Yeah. And they mark it off as they get each shot done. So.
Yeah, I think that's very practical.
Yeah. All right. So let's take a look through. I've got another example here that was really fun to do. All right. So these are their finishes and the cleanups for this whole sequence of the various angles and shots that we need to do. Like for here, this was a shot that the director wanted to do, which meant building a custom version of the vehicle without a roof. So I actually put in there, overhead shot will need a truck with the top removed, because the transpo needs to actually cut the top off of a matching vehicle to get this shot. There's no other way to do it. So this is where the power of a good storyboard really helps production. It's not just, oh, great visual. It's also helping, here's how we're going to shoot it. And I know that because I'm talking to the people who know how to do it. I'm just making sure everyone else on the crew knows what the initial thoughts are.
Yeah, as someone who talks to a lot of people in animation, the idea of, okay, yeah, we're just going to cut the top of a physical truck is wild to me. I love it.
Yeah. All right, so lots of different angles and shots. Most of these are very simple. And then we get into it. It slides out. The camera keeps going straight. He slides out of frame. Multiple angles of the truck sliding, and it slams into this post, and the vehicle bends around the post. All right, we really wanted to be able to show, because we can only.
So how do you do that?
As far as drawing it, or in production?
I mean, as far as your boards, because you take a 3D model and are showing it bent around a pole.
This is one of the fun things. Yeah, this is one of the fun things in order to make it work. And I use the power of Storyboard Pro and understanding that there is no such thing as reality. It's just whatever it takes to get something done. So what I did was I made I brought in the vehicle from one angle, and then I just erased half of the vehicle. And then I brought in the vehicle, the other angle, and I just erased part of the vehicle, right? And some of that, and I just drew. I drew the curved part, and made it match. So it's just two different models, and I just erased half the model. Even though it's a 3D model, I can still erase it and draw on it. So
it's a really clever solution.
It was so simple.
Instead of having to model like a warped car, just being able to bring in two different images of it at different angles and filling in the rest with drawings, it's very convincing.
Yeah, and I did that because there were numerous angles of the vehicle. Like here, where I had showing slide and hitting. Again, I have it flattened down to where it's just one, but that's all I did was I just had two. I imported it twice, slightly adjusted the angle, and just put them together. It's kind of like a Photoshop trick, but I did it all within Storyboard Pro, and it just works great. And then I just drew a couple, some bend lines and highlights to emphasize where it was crunched, and boom, I'd so quickly have the exact look that I'm going for from whatever angle. Because drawing cars at different angles can be difficult. So screw it, I don't do that anymore. I use the software in ways that I can, I take advantage of what the software can do to save me time and be more accurate to the director's vision. Oh, here's one of the. All right, so here's an example. So this is from a different movie. This is from Under Wraps. It's a Disney movie. It's a Halloween comedy about mummies. And this is the director, Alex Zam. So this is an example, and you could see where they crossed out up here on the right, or top left, I mean, where they would literally mark out, all right, we got this shot, and move on. So this is on set.
Yeah, it uses a checklist. That's awesome. And I think you were mentioning last time we talked that they could use it to mark down when they have the film shots, when they do the effects in post.
I can show you that exact thing. Give me just a second. I've got an image of that, a separate image I can show you. I just have to open up another drive of mine from Walking Dead when we were doing that exact thing. In fact, the talk show, The Talking Dead, I was profiled on there a number of times during the show, during the run, and either they would talk about it, or my or the director would talk about it. Let me see if I can find that photo real quick.
Yeah, I think it's really cool that there's an opportunity to talk about how like the craft of storyboarding really helped with the production.
Yeah. All right. So here's that photo from The Walking Dead. So this is this is the king of all zombies, Greg Nicotero. And these are on set, on location, on the first episode of season 9 of the original Walking Dead. And the location was actually City Hall, but it was supposed to represent a museum with a glass floor and a display under the floor, but the display was filled with walkers. So we had actual location, we had a set, and we had green screen. And the storyboards, I marked out which shots had which different elements. And so he used, I don't remember, stage, S is stage. So that was the set. And I don't remember what all the other letters designated on it, because I wasn't on set that day. So Greg would mark out, okay, we need this, this, and this for this shot. So here we've already shot the stage stuff. Now we need the green screen stuff. And here we need to shoot this on location. So he would mark out each element to make sure that between the 3 different days of shooting in different locations, that all the elements that were needed were shot. So yeah, it was very, very cool.
I love that. That is so detailed, and so I think it just shows like the value of storyboarding in that type of production.
Now, there's one other thing I wanted to show real quick. So
I love this one.
Yeah.
Pen.
Well,
those are not all pens.
Because and there's 2 things. One, a lot of directors who without a lot of experience call any movement a pan, which is wrong, unless you're in 2D animation.
It's just a side-to-side one, right?
Yeah. No, side to side. This is not a pan. That is a dolly. A pan is a stationary camera that rotates on the central axis.
Right.
Right. So the only one. This is the only one that's actually
a pan.
Right.
Right. One on the top is a truck. I forget what the one going up and down is. That a jib?
Well, it depends on the tools that you're using. It could be a crane, a boom, or a jib. So you need to know the difference. These are the actual terms.
Okay.
And there could be multiple versions of them, but the only pan is rotating left and right on the central axis. A tilt is tilting up and down on a central axis, or the camera can roll. But there's other terms like trucking back and forth. It could also be a dolly. It could be a Russian arm move. So there's different things for different types of moves. But that's where you need to know the difference, because if I put it in my storyboard that it's going to be a dolly, they're planning on making sure that they have dolly track and the dolly there for that shot.
Right.
If I say,
because in live action, like you need a physical dolly or boom if you're going to do those camera moves.
Right. And for crane shots, even shows like The Walking Dead and Fear the Walking Dead, we have a 50-foot crane, we have a 30-foot crane, we have a jib, and we have a Russian arm. But it might not be rented or planned for a specific day, or maybe second unit needs to be using it. And so if a director and DP call for a very specific set of equipment, I make sure that exact equipment is listed in the storyboards so that production management can try to plan around different things and make sure that the equipment is budgeted for, or they'll say you can't because we have another, they have to have it for the second unit. So then we have to come back and say, okay, so what can we do? Is there a building we can mount on? It's going to be a stationary rather than a crane shot. So, we try to work around it, but those questions don't come up if that information is not in the storyboard.
No, that's an excellent point.
Yeah. So the power of just kind of getting back to the main thrust of all this, the power of 3D saves me time, but also makes my boards more accurate. I mean, when you look at this, you have no questions about what's happening there. That makes this successful, especially with the notes, that I have on it. And, and even on this, with Dexter flying out, I have him flying out the window, which means that I cut this model on the left. I copied the back of it so that he can come out from underneath it. So, and all I did on that was I took this backside right here, and I just cut off part of the back and copied it and pasted the copy on another layer so that my guy flying through looks like he's coming out from inside the vehicle. No extra drawing whatsoever, just a quick little cut and paste. And then I'm able to represent the action that much better.
That's a really clever use. So, Mark, we have about 15 minutes left. Do you want to do that animatic comparison against the final footage?
Let me show you that. All right, so this is really cool. All right, so I cut this together, and I do this for really cool sequences. On YouTube, I've got a ton of these. I just call them storyboard comparisons. So I'll play this for you. This is about 1.5 minutes long. It's a short version of the whole sequence. But you'll see my storyboards and the live action running concurrently. You'll see how close it is.
Who the hell is this guy?
Afternoon, Mr. Caldwell.
Hey, Elric, turn the fucking hillbilly music down a little.
Yeah, sorry. Everything okay?
Yeah, everything's fine. Just checking in. How's your job coming?
Oh, I got your fishing game guy. He's just fine. You handling his son?
My son.
I'm handling everything. I'll see you soon.
I mean, look how close that is.
Oh, yeah.
Even the action, even the curve, the sliding of the vehicle is exactly the same.
Oof.
God.
I like how you draw Michael C. Hall.
Thanks. So, and the biggest thing what this shows you is I listen.
Yeah.
When I'm working with a director, I'm not fighting with them over their shots. If there's something I don't think works, of course I tell them, I offer alternatives. But I'm able to get exactly what the director wants, and you can tell by what ends up on the screen. Even lowering and then raising the gun again. He said, I'm going to have him do this. So I just had the gun in his hands on one layer and his body on another. So it's like, you want to see that? All right, I'll just.
You move that layer up and move layer down.
It only takes a second to do, and yet it represents the director's vision that much better.
Yeah. So the more of your boards that are used, the more useful they are, of course, as a tool in production.
Yeah, I want them to be used. Otherwise, why are they hiring a story artist? You know, which is why a number of live action directors fight against it. They don't want to do it because so often it's not their vision. So anyone who wants to get into live action, I always keep telling them, you are drawing the director's vision. You are not the director. We're there to help facilitate, plus it. If there's a missing shot, we add it in, to make sure everything works. And again, that's also why I do animatics. When I'm laying these things out, I'll do a really quick scratch track myself, just using my own voice, because then when you play it, you realize, wow, this shot, they're talking about something we're not seeing. The director didn't call this out. I'll sketch it in. And then I'll send, the director sees it along the way. So if they don't like a shot or an angle, they tell me, I make the adjustments. More often than not, my adjustments are things like, oh yeah, this is great. This plays really, really well. But now everything is represented for production to be able to use. So, and it's one of the reasons I keep getting calls, and why I stay so busy is because they actually help save production money. The cost of me is irrelevant next to how much money it would cost them without having all this information up front.
With all the equipment and people on set to operate that equipment.
Look, if they're down for an hour because something wasn't prepped, because the director wants to see something a certain way and they weren't ready, that could be $150,000. Well, I'm not getting paid that much for production, so I just save them a ton of money and time. And in a show, these big shows, generally it's between 8 and 12 days of production for shooting. For doing an hour, anywhere from 48 minutes to an hour, depending if it's streaming or broadcast TV, that's a lot you need to get done every day. You need to constantly be moving, which means they need to be as properly prepped as possible. And I do everything I can to make sure that the boards I'm providing give them that. And I could not do that without the power of Storyboard Pro. I mean, it's like I was an old paper guy. Before computers, I was storyboarding. Then I got into storyboarding in Photoshop, and literally the first time, it was early. It's like version 1.5 or something like that of Storyboard Pro. You guys came out to my studio, showed it to me, and I was like, "This is it." Don't even bother taking the demo off my software. I'm using it, and I became a convert. Which is then when I started working with you guys and working with engineers to make sure that it worked for live action, because obviously originally it was only for animation. So, your team is fantastic, responsive, and what little work I was able to do with you guys, this now works for live action as well as it does for animation. I mean, it's absolutely incredible. And I won't storyboard outside of Storyboard Pro. I don't know why I would. This saves so much time. And anyone at my studio, you can't work at my studio unless you're using Storyboard Pro, because I have a pipeline that's so efficient, and my clients expect something, a very specific way and style and speed of delivery that is absolutely not possible with any other type of software. That's how strongly I feel about it.
Mark, I was curious to ask you, when did you first start using 3D models in your boards?
As soon as it became an option in Storyboard Pro. Every once in a while, the only time I can't use a 3D model in Storyboard Pro is when, like, the art department of a show or a movie has a very dense 3D set, right, with so many things, and then it just doesn't become practical. It just takes too long to move around within Storyboard Pro, which is understandable. So then I use SketchUp. In that case, I'll just export a JPEG out of SketchUp. I find the angle I need, export it out, and just use it as a background layer. So I bring it in like any other photo or image and just use that as a background. So even worst case scenario, I still use even really dense and heavy 3D sets in Storyboard Pro, but I might just import it in from another software if I just find it's too big. But for vehicles and props and certain kinds of sets, there's nothing like it. Even like, helicopters, not the easiest things in the world to draw, but it's so fast and easy for me just to bring it in. And the director tells me exactly what, and I just show them, what's the angle you want to see this at. And the only issue I have here is it depends on how the software or how the 3D model is saved.
Right.
If the center of the model is not centered on the object, when you rotate around, it'll be off. Like this helicopter, it's not centered on the helicopter. I can still manipulate and move around, and it just takes me a couple seconds longer.
It's not as clean with the movements.
But
because I can see the center's on the tail, I guess, right?
Yeah, it's actually even off the tail, which is kind of a pain in the butt on this. But it only takes a couple seconds to move it around back to where I need it. Boom. Yeah, I like that. Bring it in. Now I've got my my helicopter, and then I can scale it, however I need to, and place it in the panel. And if I don't like that, again, I just right click on it, update model position, and I rotate around until I'm happy, and I'm ready to rock and roll. I don't care how fast you are drawing. You're not drawing a helicopter in accurate perspective as fast as I can manipulate it this way. So, yeah, to me, there's not even a question. Why would I do it any other way?
Yeah. A lot of our viewers are story artists who work in animation. Do you have any just like quick ideas about how storyboarding for live action can present different challenges and opportunities?
Sure. So one of those I mentioned is that numbering is different. And like I mentioned, if you just go to Edit Preferences, which might be a little different on the Mac, terminology style, it's on the General tab. You've got animation or live action. And then it just sets up the difference between, scenes and shots or scenes and sequences. So, it's as simple as it is. That's hugely important, because if you can't number the scenes properly, it won't work for live action. Because they're planning, the script is broken into scenes. And so my scene numbers, where the dialogue and the action is, has to match the script, period. So there's a lot of shots within each scene. So you have to match the proper numbering. Otherwise, it fails. I mean, there's two ways to look at it. It either fails or succeeds. Bad numbering, it fails. The other thing is we also don't have to do as much drawing in live action. Some animation people, when they come over to live action, they're trying to do every keyframe. We're not telling the actors how to act. All right? We're representing the overall scope of the action. So if someone's running, I don't need to show every step like you do in animation. No, one kick-ass pose. And if I want to put emotion, I just slide it. Do not do extra drawings. They literally do not want to see it. A director and producer will complain if you have too many drawings in live action boards, because they don't want to see 5 pages of storyboards of something that's represented by one drawing, right? It becomes a hassle for production if you're overdrawing. You do enough drawings to represent the actions, you move on. Which also means we don't have to draw as much. So, okay, that's cool. The other thing is they don't want to see cartoony artwork. So, the faces need to be comic book style or less cartoony, more realistic. If your characters are looking like, Ren and Stimpy or Warner Brothers animation, a director won't want it, and you're not going to get hired. It
has to be fairly anatomical.
It has to be anatomically correct, and faces can't be cartoony. You also have to know how to work with a director, how to ask the right questions, how not to fight for you. I've had to fire story artists who think that a director doesn't know what they're doing and fights for their vision. And I keep telling them, that's not your call. If you're fighting with a live action director because you think your idea is better, you can argue, how about this? And if they say, no, I really want it this way, you're drawing it that way, or you're going to get fired. Because it's the director's vision, not yours. We're there to help and support and get the director's vision. You need to know camera terms. We talked about that. Because when you're putting your notes in, like I label my arrows, because an arrow can often mean more than one thing. If an arrow can mean more than one thing, the storyboard fails. If it's a possibility, just write in it. What does it mean? Is it a pan? Is it a dolly? Is it the car moving, or is it the camera moving? Well, it's very easy. Just write car in the arrow or camera in the arrow. And then it can't be misunderstood. You have to make sure that anything that's on there, people can only read it as one way.
So you don't want ambiguity.
Can't have ambiguity. If it can be misunderstood, it will be misunderstood. And if it is misunderstood, there's going to be a problem, a miscommunication, a waste of time and money in production. So, and literally that goes against our very job. Our job is to make things as accurate, as helpful, to make plan from, and inspire. It's one of the reasons I spend time making sure that, you know, the vehicles look great by using 3D models, or that my actors look like the actual actors, or, you know, kick-ass action is kick-ass looking. It inspires production to go that extra yard. You know, that's why we don't just send them roughs. Although, you know, there are times if you've got to do 100 drawings in a day or two, they're not going to be as accurate. But sometimes you have to do it that fast because they're about to start shooting. And if your boards aren't done, they can't use them for production. It's useless. So,
right. Mark, on that note, and because I can see we're going over time, I wanted to ask you really quickly, where can our viewers find more of your work and follow you on the web?
Well, if they follow me on LinkedIn, it's the only platform that I post samples on is LinkedIn. Just look up Mark Simon. I'm easy to find. Or at my website at storyboards-east.com. That's my studio. Tons of samples on there. Or you can just look up Mark Simon Story Artist on YouTube. I've got a ton of stuff there, including a lot of videos specifically for you guys, for Toon Boom, on using the software.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Mark, for joining us today on our live stream about your work on Dexter New Blood, as well as storyboarding with 3D assets. And thank you to our audience for tuning into our discussion. If our viewers would like to use Storyboard Pro for their next project, visit toonboom.com for a 21-day free trial. On February 14th, Mariev Lassell, aka Z-Bird Brain, will be hosting a live art stream on our channel. And on February 15th, Mike Morris will be co-hosting Collaboratory with special guest Laura Frankie. You don't want to miss it, so be sure to tune in next time.